Part 1, A New Beginning. I remember the day we moved in like it was yesterday, bright, crisp, and with an air of something new. The house, nestled on the outskirts of a quiet rural town, was perfect for us. There were trees surrounding the property, the kind that made everything feel more secluded, like we were the only ones left in the world. It had that charm, that warm, inviting feeling that old houses often have. And it was big, far bigger than what we'd had in the city. We didn't know it yet, but the house was already waiting for us, waiting to reveal its secrets. At first, the nights were peaceful, the kind of quiet that felt good, like the world was taking a breath, the kind of peace that made you think you could leave your door open without a worry. The rooms were filled with the smell of fresh paint, and we spent our evenings unpacking boxes, sipping wine, and planning out our new life. But there were little things that, at the time, seemed insignificant. Like the way the kitchen light would flicker just for a second as I reached for a cup, or the odd creaking sounds that echoed from somewhere above us when the house was otherwise still. I'd joke about it, calling it the house settling, but my partner would pause and glance nervously at the ceiling. He'd laugh it off, but there was always that strange silence that followed. Then came the first real oddity, a night when we'd both been in bed for a while. I was half asleep, drifting in that quiet space between wakefulness and dreams, when I heard it, a soft, faint tapping. It was coming from the hallway, somewhere just outside our room. At first I thought it was the wind, or maybe the house settling, but then it grew louder. It wasn't rhythmic like a branch tapping against a window. It was deliberate. I pulled the covers tighter around me and listened, heart racing. The sound stopped, just like that. But the air in the room felt different, heavier. I told myself it was nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Part 2, Unseen Eyes. Days passed, and the strange occurrences continued. At first, we tried to ignore them. There was always a reason, some logical explanation. But then the occurrences began to pile up. Little things like objects that weren't where we'd left them, a book falling off a shelf for no reason, and the ever-present feeling that someone, or something, was just out of sight. One evening after dinner, I decided to go up to the attic to see if we could find any old furniture we could use. The stairs creaked under my feet as I climbed. The air up there was stale and thick, the kind of damp smell you expect from an attic that hasn't been touched in years. It was too dark to see anything clearly, but I noticed something odd, a shadow, just a flicker of movement in the corner of the room. I froze, feeling a chill creep up my spine. I wasn't alone in the attic. Someone or something was there. I waited, listening intently, but no other sounds followed. No footsteps, no creaking. It was as if I'd imagined it, but I hadn't. I turned on my heel and rushed downstairs. When I reached the bottom, I couldn't help but glance over at my partner, who was sitting on the couch reading a book. His eyes didn't meet mine immediately, and for a moment I just stood there, wondering if I should even mention what I'd seen. But the way he looked at me, wide-eyed, almost startled, told me he had felt it too. He dropped the book onto the coffee table and stood up slowly. I've been hearing things at night, strange things. My heart dropped. He wasn't talking about the usual creaks. This was something else. Something that made the air feel heavier. Part 3, The Visitor. Over the next few weeks, the house seemed to grow more alive. The oddities intensified. Every night there would be more sounds, whispers in the dark, footsteps that seemed to follow us wherever we went. Sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night and swear I saw a figure standing in the doorway, a shadow with no discernible shape. But when I blinked, it was gone. One night, I couldn't take it any longer. I decided to confront whatever was haunting us, to find out what it wanted. I stayed up late, sitting in the dark, waiting. The minutes stretched into hours, and then it happened again, the tapping. This time it was louder, clearer. I stood up, my pulse racing, and tiptoed toward the source. The hallway was empty, but I could feel the weight of something invisible but there, just behind me. Suddenly the tapping stopped, and then I heard it, the faintest whisper, right beside my ear. Leave. I spun around, heart in my throat, but no one was there. The silence was overwhelming. We couldn't stay. We left that very night, not looking back. The house, with its heavy air and whispered warnings, stayed behind, waiting for the next tenants. but I'll never forget that feeling. The feeling that something had been watching us, waiting for us to leave. The presence, invisible but undeniable, still haunts me in my dreams. Part 1. A peaceful escape. I'd always thought of the woods as a place of peace, a quiet getaway from the chaos of city life. So when my friends suggested a weekend camping trip deep into the forest, I couldn't resist. We were all excited, full of the energy that comes with being far away from our usual routines. A couple of tents, a campfire, and some drinks. It sounded perfect, simple, quiet, and just the kind of reset we needed. We packed up the cars and headed out late on a Friday afternoon, winding down a long dirt road until the trees began to close in around us. The forest seemed endless, the canopy thick above us, blocking out most of the sunlight. The deeper we went, the quieter it became. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy, the kind you only get in places that haven't seen human presence in a long time. As we arrived at the campsite, I remember looking around. The trees were towering, their branches swaying gently in the wind. There was something about the stillness that was almost unsettling. But we shrugged it off, laughing it off as the normal nervous energy that came with being in the woods. We set up our tents, and as the evening drew in, we gathered around the campfire. The crackling of the fire was the only sound that filled the space, and the air grew cooler as night fell. We talked, drank, and joked like we always did, but there was an undercurrent to the night, something unspoken. Maybe it was the strange quiet of the woods, or maybe it was just the fact that the forest seemed to press in around us, like it was holding its breath. I couldn't quite place it, but I wasn't the only one who felt it. Part 2. The first sign. The first sign came later that night. After we'd settled into our tents and turned off the flashlights, the forest was alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures. But as I lay there in the dark, trying to sleep, something was different. There was a subtle sound, one that didn't belong, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Soft, almost imperceptible, but still there. I held my breath and strained my ears. At first, I thought it was one of my friends, maybe coming to the bathroom or just checking on the fire. But no one came to my tent, and the footsteps stopped just outside. I waited for them to start up again, but it was as if whoever it was had stopped dead in their tracks. Then the sound of rustling leaves, a pause, another rustle. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. My heartbeat seemed louder than it should have been. I couldn't see anything through the tent, but I knew someone or something was out there. My mind raced. Could it be another camper? A hunter? Or was it something else? I pushed the thoughts out of my head. It was probably just an animal, I told myself. But I couldn't shake the unease that crept through my body like a cold chill. I tried to go back to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadow, a figure just outside, standing still, watching. I must have drifted off eventually, but the next morning, the uneasy feeling hadn't gone away. As we gathered around the campfire for breakfast, one of my friends, Ben, mentioned something strange. He'd heard footsteps too. Not just anyone's footsteps, though. He said they sounded deliberate, like someone walking slowly around the campsite, avoiding the firelight. We all laughed it off, calling it the wind or an animal, but deep down, I knew none of us were completely at ease. Part 3, the hunt begins. It wasn't until later that afternoon that things started to get real. We decided to go on a short hike deeper into the woods, hoping to shake off the eerie feelings that had settled over us. The trees grew thicker as we ventured further in, and the light began to fade, turning the forest into a labyrinth of shadows. It was beautiful, in a way, almost mystical, but there was something undeniably menacing about the way the trees seemed to close in on us, the silence pressing down on us like a weight. We'd been walking for a while when we noticed it. The feeling of being watched. It wasn't just the normal unease of being in the woods, it was different. This felt intentional, like someone or something was tracking us. The air grew cold, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I tried to shake it off, but the sense of eyes on us only intensified. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see someone or something standing just beyond the tree line. But there was nothing. Then it happened. A loud crack, like a branch snapping underfoot, suddenly shattered the silence. We all froze. Everyone turned, but again, there was nothing. No movement, no rustling leaves. Nothing but the oppressive stillness of the forest. We started walking faster, the sense of being followed growing stronger with every step. The trees seemed to bend toward us, blocking out the light. And that's when we saw it. A figure, standing far off in the distance, almost hidden by the trees. It wasn't moving, just standing there, watching us. Panic surged through me, and I instinctively reached for Ben's arm. He looked as scared as I felt. But when we all turned to run, the figure disappeared. Just gone. We didn't stop running until we reached the campsite. Our hearts were pounding, our breaths ragged. There was no explanation. We didn't know who or what was out there, but we knew one thing for sure. It wasn't just a shadow. As night fell again, we huddled close together by the fire, but the night didn't feel as safe this time. The woods seemed to have swallowed up the sounds of the forest. Everything was too quiet, and even the fire's warmth couldn't chase away the chill that had settled into my bones. That night, none of us slept, and I'm sure none of us will ever forget the feeling of being hunted through the trees. Part 1. The Dream Home. It seemed like the perfect place. For years I'd dreamed of finding a house like this, an old, charming Victorian, nestled in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The house wasn't too big, not like the sprawling mansions I'd seen in the city, but it had character. The moment I stepped inside, I knew this was the one. The hardwood floors creaked underfoot, the walls were covered in vintage wallpaper that hinted at decades of history. It had a lived-in feel, as though time had passed and stories had been written within these walls. It wasn't just the house itself that drew me in, it was the location. Quiet street, nice neighbors, a perfect blend of seclusion and convenience. A place to settle down, maybe raise a family. I could see it all, the future I'd always wanted. The realtor didn't mention much about the history of the house, but she didn't need to. The house was well kept, obviously maintained by someone who loved it. Or so I thought. When I asked her about the previous owners, she shrugged it off. Old folks, moved out a few months ago. Don't worry about it. I should have worried about it. At first, everything was perfect. The house was cozy, and there were enough rooms to spread out, but not too many to feel isolated. It felt like the right place to start fresh. I spent the first few weeks painting the walls, fixing up the garden, and getting everything settled. I was content. Happy even. But something was off. Something that I couldn't quite place. Part 2. The first sign. It started small, strange, almost unnoticeable details. The first time I noticed it, I dismissed it as nothing more than the house settling. But the more it happened, the harder it was to ignore. One evening, after a long day of unpacking, I stood in front of the kitchen window, looking out over the backyard. The sun was just starting to set, casting a golden glow over the garden. As I stared out, something caught my eye. Just a flicker, a shadow moving across the window. I blinked and the shadow was gone. I told myself it was just the wind, or perhaps a trick of the light. But that feeling, that prickling sensation at the back of my neck, lingered. Something wasn't right. The odd occurrences started to multiply. A light that flickered in the hallway at night. The faintest sounds coming from the attic, even though I hadn't been up there in days. And then there was the smell, faint, musty, like old wood, but there was something underneath it. A sour scent that I couldn't get rid of, no matter how much I cleaned. But the strangest thing happened one evening when I was sitting in the living room, watching TV. I glanced at the hallway mirror, and for a split second I saw a figure, just a shadow, reflected in the glass. I whipped my head around, but there was nothing there. No one in the hallway. Yet, when I looked back at the mirror, I could still see the shadow, faint and barely there. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't. I stood up and walked over to the mirror. I touched the glass, staring into my own reflection, as if expecting something to happen, but nothing did. The reflection was just me. Alone. Part 3. The truth revealed. The house began to change. Not physically, but something about it was different. It was like the walls were closing in, pushing me towards something, toward a realization I wasn't ready to accept. I couldn't stop myself from exploring more of the house. One day, while cleaning out the basement, I found something odd behind a pile of old boxes, an old ledger. The pages were yellow with age, and the writing was faded, but it was still legible. I flipped through it, and my stomach dropped as I read the entries. The previous owner, an elderly man named Arthur, had kept meticulous notes about the house. But as I read, the entries grew stranger. One page read, "The door in the back bedroom is too much. I've tried to seal it, but it won't stay closed. She still gets in." Another entry said, "I hear her in the walls again, scratching. I can't sleep. It's coming closer." I thought about the attic, the strange sounds I'd heard. My pulse quickened. I spent the rest of that evening researching the history of the house, trying to find out more about Arthur and his mysterious references. That's when I found it. The property had been passed down through generations, and before Arthur, the house had been owned by a family who had mysteriously disappeared without a trace. There were no records of what happened to them, just a gap in time as if they had never existed at all. The truth began to sink in. The house wasn't just old, it was something else, something dark. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard it again. The scratching. It started in the walls, faint at first, then louder, more frantic. I got up, my heart pounding, and moved toward the sound. It came from behind the door in the back bedroom, the one Arthur had written about. I hesitated for a moment, then slowly turned the knob. The door creaked open, revealing nothing but dust and shadows. But as I stepped inside, I felt the temperature drop. My breath came out in visible puffs, and I knew something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. I turned to leave, but as I did, I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye, a figure standing at the edge of the room. I didn't look directly at it. I couldn't. My feet were rooted to the floor, my heartbeat deafening in my ears. The figure didn't move, but I knew it was there, watching. That's when I understood. The house hadn't just been sold, it had been abandoned for a reason. The truth about its past wasn't just hidden in old records. It was still here, still trapped in the walls, in the rooms, in the very air I breathed. I left the house that night. I don't know why I didn't burn it to the ground, but I didn't. Maybe because I knew that whatever haunted that place would never truly leave. Maybe it would find someone else to torment, someone else to scare. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been just another part of the house's history, a history that was far from over. As the stories come to an end, the quiet sets in. The world outside seems distant now, as if it's holding its breath, waiting for something. You feel it, don't you? That lingering sensation of eyes on you. The shadows seem darker, the silence heavier. It's as if these stories are still with you, crawling under your skin, twisting in your thoughts. But don't worry, there's nothing there. Not really. You're safe now. Or are you? It's easy to brush these things off, isn't it? We tell ourselves there's always a logical explanation. The creaks in the floorboards, the strange noises in the night, the flicker of a light that shouldn't have turned on. We tell ourselves it's nothing more than a trick of the mind, a flicker of imagination. But deep down, in that small, quiet corner of your thoughts, you know better. Because sometimes what we can't explain is what we should fear the most. End of script. Sleep well.